comes out in favor, of course, of Dobbs in the state of Mississippi. The issue, of course, whether Roe v. Wade would be overturned, we'll have to read to get specifics of that. But essentially, this ruling, as we saw in the draft that was released prematurely, would send that power back to the states to regulate, if they wish, abortion, or to outlaw it as they wish. Again, to turn that back to the people of the states and to the legislatures to write the laws associated with it. You're looking right now outside the Supreme Court. Now, there are people there that have gotten together to protest what was expected to be this Dobbs opinion, and there are others that are very happy that this has finally come out. This after 50 years of people anticipating, since 1973, Roe v. Wade coming out, and a lot of people feeling that it was legislating from the bench, that it was inappropriately decided, that it created a right to abortion that did not exist. And that is essentially the point that Judge Clarence Thomas made, or I should say Alito made, in writing this decision. And again, let's bring in Joe and Victoria to get comments. Joe, your first thoughts here.
Well, this is a momentous day. The Constitution, according to the court, does not confer a right to an abortion under the Constitution. Roe versus Wade and Casey are specifically overruled by the court, and the matter of abortion is returned to the states for each state under our federalism to decide how to treat it. This is an amazing day in this country for constitutional law.
And it should not matter how one feels about abortion, the policy of abortion, or if you were in a legislature and how you were going to vote. This was lousy law.
Roe versus Wade.
Yes, Roe versus Wade.
And
was lousy law.
Sure.
And any good lawyer will tell you that.
And again, if this will now go back to the states and their decision. Thank you, production team. We've got a live look outside the Supreme Court. You've got people who are crying tears of joy and crying tears of anger and frustration with this decision coming down. If we take a closer look at the decision, trying to look at the breakdown of it, it was Alito who still wrote the majority opinion. Is that correct? Because again, when you get back to the leak, it was his
Roberts
draft.
Concurred. Roberts concurred.
Roberts is in the majority, and you have the three liberals dissenting. So it remained the same even after the opinion was leaked. Nobody changed their vote, which is a victory for the Supreme Court and the rule of law, that they were not intimidated by the violence against Kavanaugh and the threats of violence against the other justices at their home, and shame on the Attorney General for not protecting the justices properly.
And as you were saying, it doesn't matter what position you are on the issue of abortion. There are many legal experts, and I assume yourselves among them, who have looked at this decision from 1973 and said this is legislating from the bench. There was nothing at all in the case brought before them that would have led to the trimester concept or reading a constitutional right to abortion that was created by the court back then.
And let me name you one, okay? Ruth Bader Ginsburg. We knew Ruth, and great person, very quiet, and very serious.
And that she does still read a case into it. But I guess the point I was trying to make is this clearly was legislating from the bench. And
Ruth said that. I mean, that's what's important. Ruth said we shouldn't have decided it. We went beyond all the state legislatures. They were still working it out because the Supreme Court likes to let issues percolate, as they call it, around the country. And they took this on much too soon.
And of course, as we saw in Casey, which was a subsequent abortion opinion, they essentially took some of the focus away from Roe v. Wade and said you could not create an undue burden on a woman. Again, creating law from the bench. And in this case, Alito coming out and saying you can't do that.
Right. If you think back to May 3rd, that was when Politico actually published that leaked draft opinion, which I obviously haven't had time to read through the entirety of the 213-page opinion decision quite yet. But it looks as though, because it's authored by the same justice here, parts of it would likely be similar. We'll go through. And also, if you could, Joe and Victoria, stay with us because we want to talk about the impact that this ruling will have on states across our nation going forward. Before we get to that, let's turn now to our reporter, congressional correspondent, Kilmeny Ducard. She's live outside the Supreme Court. Got a little bit more details for us. Kilmeny.
Yeah, Emma, this was the big case that we had been waiting for, and the reaction outside the Supreme Court was one of enormous cheers from anti-abortion activists. But you can hear the crowd behind me, and this is certainly going to create tension and discourse. One far-left group, Jane's Revenge, promising a day of rage if the Supreme Court were to overturn Roe. We're going to pan back over to those protesters for you while I break down this decision. This was a 6-3 majority ruling, again with liberal justices Breyer, Kagan, and Sotomayor dissenting. Justice Samuel Alito delivering that opinion, saying that the Constitution does not prohibit the citizens of each state from regulating or prohibiting abortion. We overrule those decisions and return the authority to people and their elected reps. This is a significant ruling, but perhaps not a surprise in the wake of that leaked draft opinion, which created a lot of the demonstrations that we saw, not just outside of the Supreme Court, but outside of the homes of those justices, leading to charged up rhetoric where a man attempted to murder Justice Kavanaugh outside of his home in Chevy Chase, Maryland. We are bracing for perhaps more unrest over the weekend in the wake of this decision. But let's go back to the case for a moment. Jackson Women's Health Organization had said, of course, that this would pose an undue burden on women having to travel further distances. It appears that Illinois would be the closest state to Mississippi in terms of women that would go to, but in terms of the overall national impact, we know that more than 20 states, as a result of this, could enact abortion bans or significantly prohibit abortions. This is something that the Biden administration has been trying to prepare for. The Vice President, Kamala Harris, had a roundtable with state attorneys general talking about steps that they can take to help with this process. Again, there's been legislation and talk of executive orders that President Biden could take in the wake of this decision to maybe federally fund abortion clinics or perhaps pay for travel or childcare for women who choose to have abortions, and other states and maybe even federal employees would get paid time off as a result of this. So we're going to continue to watch this, but the state had argued that they were only shortening this by 1 week. Mississippi allows for abortions up to 20 weeks. That was the current law. Jackson Women's Health Organization, they perform abortions up to 16 weeks. So the state had argued in this case that they were only shortening it by 1 week. So once again, a huge impact, the biggest decision we have seen from the Supreme Court in decades on this, reversing decades of precedent that the Supreme Court had set. And of course, we're going to continue to watch as the scene evolves here. A lot of people at work today, but over the weekend, when people are not at their offices, we can expect to see larger crowds outside the Supreme Court here.
We'll be waiting to see the White House's reaction as well, monitoring that. Kilmeny Ducard with the very latest. Kilmeny, thank you.
'Cause the flag still stands for freedom, and they can't take that